The Great Train Robbery. On the night of August 8th, 1963, Britain awoke to the news of one of the boldest heists in history, the Great Train Robbery. A Royal Mail train traveling from Glasgow to London was ambushed in Buckinghamshire, and a gang of 15 men escaped with more than £2.5 million, equivalent to over 50 million today. The scale, precision, and sheer audacity of the robbery made it instantly notorious. The plan was masterminded by Bruce Reynolds, a career criminal. His gang included a mix of seasoned thieves, forgers, and ex-soldiers. They tampered with railway signals to bring the train to a halt at a remote stretch of track. Once the train stopped, the crew was overpowered, and the robbers uncoupled the engine and front two cars containing cash. Using inside information, they knew that this particular night's load included unusually large amounts of banknotes being transferred. The gang worked quickly, but efficiently. They loaded bags of cash into waiting trucks and vanished into the night. The haul, £2.6 million, was the largest theft in British history at the time. The crime stunned the public, not only because of its scale, but because it seemed almost cinematic in execution. Newspapers dubbed it the crime of the century. Yet the robbers' triumph was short-lived. Police launched one of the largest manhunts in UK history. Within months, most of the gang was arrested. In 1964, 11 men were sentenced to a combined 300 years in prison. But even behind bars, the robbery kept its mythic aura. Several of the robbers later escaped prison, fueling a legend that blurred the line between criminality and folklore. The Great Train Robbery became more than a crime. It became part of British cultural history. Songs, books, and films romanticized the heist, even as victims and law enforcement reminded the public of its violence. The train driver had been brutally beaten during the raid. It remains a cautionary tale of how daring criminal acts can captivate the imagination, while their real-world consequences leave scars that last far longer than the headlines. The Banco Central Burglary. In August of 2005, Brazil witnessed what would become one of the most spectacular bank robberies in history, the Banco Central Burglary in Fortaleza. Unlike violent smash-and-grab jobs, this heist was a masterpiece of patience, engineering, and deception. The thieves didn't storm the bank, they tunneled into it. For 3 months, a team of more than 20 men worked in secrecy, digging a tunnel 250 feet long from a rented house to the bank's vault. Disguised as landscapers, they even set up a fake company to avoid suspicion. Inside the tunnel, they installed lights, fans, and even wooden supports, ensuring the passage was stable and secure. It was a professional operation, executed with the precision of an engineering project. On the weekend of August 6th, the tunnel reached its destination, directly beneath the bank's vault. The gang quietly broke through reinforced concrete and, without triggering alarms, entered the vault. Over the course of hours, they hauled out more than 160 million Brazilian reais, worth about $70 million at the time, in used, non-sequential bills. The weight of the money was staggering, estimated at nearly 4 tons. When bank employees discovered the empty vault on Monday morning, they were stunned. There were no signs of forced entry from above. The robbers had vanished, leaving only the tunnel behind. It was one of the largest cash robberies in history, and its sophistication captivated the world. But like many heists, success was short-lived. Police investigations quickly began, and within months, several suspects were arrested. Some of the money was recovered, but the majority, hundreds of millions of reais, remains missing to this day. The robbery also had a darker aftermath. Several members of the gang were murdered in disputes over the stolen fortune, proving that even the most ingenious crimes carry consequences. The Banco Central Burglary stands as one of the most daring and audacious heists ever attempted. A story of ambition, ingenuity, and greed literally carved out of the earth beneath a bank. The Northern Bank Robbery. On December 20th, 2004, Belfast, Northern Ireland, became the stage for one of the most audacious bank heists in European history, the Northern Bank Robbery. Unlike chaotic smash and grabs, this operation was executed with meticulous planning, intimidation, and political overtones that left investigators pointing toward paramilitary groups. The crime began not at the bank itself, but at the homes of two Northern Bank employees. Armed men posing as police officers arrived, took their families hostage, and threatened them with death if they did not cooperate. Under duress, the employees were forced to go to work the next day as if nothing was wrong. Inside the bank's headquarters in central Belfast, they quietly prepared to hand over cash. On the night of the robbery, the employees loaded pallets of banknotes into vans and handed them to the gang. The haul was staggering, more than £26 million in used and new notes, making it the largest bank robbery in British and Irish history at the time. The sheer scale of the theft shocked the public and became a political flashpoint. Suspicion quickly fell on the Irish Republican Army, IRA, as the robbery had the hallmarks of paramilitary discipline, including the use of safe houses, logistics, and intimidation. Though the IRA denied involvement, both the British and Irish governments accused them of orchestrating the raid, straining fragile peace negotiations following the Good Friday Agreement. Despite intensive investigations, only a fraction of the money was ever recovered, and prosecutions proved difficult. Several individuals were arrested in connection with laundering the stolen funds, but the core perpetrators remain unidentified. The Northern Bank robbery was not just a financial crime, it was a political earthquake. It exposed the lingering shadow of paramilitary power in Northern Ireland and highlighted how organized crime could intertwine with political conflict. Even today, the robbery remains a mystery wrapped in suspicion, its full truth locked away with those who planned and executed it. The Brink's-Mat Robbery. On November 26, 1983, Heathrow Airport in London became the site of what was quickly dubbed the crime of the century. Known as the Brink's-Mat Robbery, it was supposed to be a straightforward theft of cash, but instead the criminals stumbled upon a treasure trove of gold, sparking one of the most infamous heists in British history. The operation began when a gang of 6 armed men broke into the Brink's-Mat warehouse with the help of an inside man. Expecting to find £3 million in cash, they discovered something far more valuable. More than 6,000 gold bars, weighing nearly 3 tons, along with diamonds and cash. The total haul was worth £26 million at the time, over $100 million in today's value. The robbery was executed with startling efficiency. The gang subdued security guards with threats of violence, then loaded the gold into a waiting van. What they didn't realize was that stealing the gold was only the beginning of their problems. Unlike cash, gold has to be laundered, melted, and reintroduced into legitimate markets, a process that required networks of fences, corrupt officials, and international smuggling. Over the years, large amounts of the stolen gold were believed to have been melted down and sold, sometimes even making their way back into the global jewelry trade. Meanwhile, the police launched an enormous investigation. Several of the original robbers were caught and sentenced, but much of the fortune was never recovered. The case spawned decades of criminal intrigue, with underworld figures tied to murders, betrayals, and violent disputes connected to the heist. The Brink's-Mat robbery changed the face of organized crime in Britain. It blurred the line between traditional armed robbery and large-scale financial crime, introducing vast sums of dirty money into real estate and business investments. Its legacy continues to haunt the UK criminal underworld, with echoes of its blood-soaked aftermath still surfacing decades later. The Banco Itaú robbery. In August of 1999, São Paulo, Brazil, became the scene of a daring inside job that shook the nation's financial world. Known as the Banco Itaú robbery, it combined meticulous planning, insider knowledge, and high-stakes execution, leaving investigators scrambling and the public stunned. The target was a branch of Banco Itaú, one of Brazil's largest and most respected financial institutions. Unlike many bank robberies that rely on brute force or dramatic break-ins, this heist was carefully orchestrated with help from insiders. Employees were threatened and coerced, forced to cooperate with the robbers under fear for their families' safety. This tactic mirrored other notorious Latin American robberies where kidnappings and intimidation replaced gunfire and alarms. Once inside, The robbers accessed vaults and safety deposit boxes, making off with an extraordinary haul. Though exact numbers vary depending on reports, estimates place the value at around 100 million US dollars in cash, jewels, and valuables. What made the case particularly sensational was the revelation that organized crime groups had coordinated the plan, using detailed intelligence about the bank's procedures, guard rotations, and security weaknesses. The robbery triggered widespread outrage in Brazil. The Itaú heist underscored how vulnerable even the most prestigious banks could be to criminals with inside knowledge. It also highlighted a broader pattern in Brazil during the late 20th century, banks being targeted not only by armed gangs, but also by sophisticated networks willing to invest months of planning into their crimes. Authorities eventually arrested several suspects, but as with many of the world's great robberies, much of the stolen fortune was never recovered. The scandal damaged public trust in bank security and cemented the Banco Itaú robbery as one of the most audacious financial crimes in Brazilian history. The Dunbar Armored Robbery. On the night of September 12, 1997, Los Angeles became the stage for the largest cash heist ever committed on American soil. The target was the Dunbar Armored facility, a secure depot where millions of dollars were stored before distribution to banks and ATMs. At the heart of the crime was Alan Pace, a trusted employee who knew the building's security systems better than anyone else. Pace had been working at Dunbar for years, carefully studying the schedules, alarms, and camera placements. With 5 accomplices, all close friends, he decided to strike during a Friday night shift, when the vaults were full from bank deliveries and lightly staffed. Using his inside knowledge, the crew entered the facility with stolen keys, disabled cameras, and ambushed the guards with speed and precision. Once inside, they loaded more than $18 million in cash into waiting vehicles. The robbery was executed so flawlessly that investigators initially suspected it must have been an inside job. Yet Pace had planned carefully, even distributing the stolen money through shell companies and real estate deals to cover the trail. For nearly 3 years, the crew evaded capture. Their downfall came not from the police, but from greed. One of the robbers carelessly loaned marked bills to a friend, who eventually tipped off authorities. Investigators traced the money back to Pace and his partners. All were arrested, and Pace was sentenced to 24 years in prison. Although much of the money was eventually recovered, several million dollars remain missing to this day. The Dunbar Armored robbery stands out not only for the staggering sum stolen, but also for the way it was executed, not with brute force, but with insider knowledge, patience, and planning. It proved that sometimes the most dangerous thief is the one who already holds the keys. The Loomis Fargo Heist. In October of 1997, Charlotte, North Carolina, was shaken by one of the most brazen cash robberies in American history. Known as the Loomis Fargo Heist, it wasn't pulled off by a shadowy gang of career criminals, but by a group of ordinary people who dreamed of living like millionaires overnight. The mastermind was David Gaunt, a vault supervisor at Loomis Fargo & Co. Tired of his modest paycheck, Gaunt teamed up with Kelly Campbell, a former co-worker, and her friend Steve Chambers, an ambitious schemer. On the night of October 4th, Gaunt used his access to load a company van with bags of cash straight from the vault. By the time he finished, the van held more than $17 million in bundled bills. The heist itself was shockingly simple. Gaunt drove the van away from the Loomis facility and handed it over to Chambers and his crew, who quickly stashed the money in hiding places across North Carolina. Gaunt then fled to Mexico with a small portion of the loot, planning to reunite with Campbell later and claim his share. But while the theft had been easy, hiding the money proved their undoing. Chambers and his wife, suddenly flush with wealth, couldn't resist flaunting their new lifestyle. They bought luxury cars, a mansion, and piles of expensive goods, all while neighbors and friends wondered how 2 working-class people had become so rich overnight. Their spending spree caught the FBI's attention almost immediately. Investigators traced the money trail and soon uncovered the entire conspiracy. Gaunt was arrested in Mexico in 1998, while Chambers, Campbell, and other accomplices were caught in the United States. The majority of the cash was eventually recovered, though several million remained missing. The Loomis Fargo heist was notorious not only for the sheer amount stolen, making it one of the largest cash robberies in U.S. history, but also for the almost comedic recklessness of its perpetrators. What began as a seemingly flawless inside job quickly unraveled into a tale of greed, betrayal, and hubris. The Stopwatch Gang. In the 1970s and early 1980s, a trio of Canadian criminals earned international notoriety under the nickname the Stopwatch Gang. Comprised of Patty Mitchell, Lionel Wright, and Stephen Reed, the crew became infamous for their speed, precision, and sheer audacity. Unlike violent gangs that relied on chaos, the Stopwatch Gang specialized in discipline and timing, carrying out robberies in under 2 minutes, fast enough to leave security guards and police helpless. Their operations targeted banks across Canada and the United States, often suburban branches with less security. They used meticulous planning and reconnaissance, sometimes watching a branch for weeks before striking. Disguises, clean getaways, and carefully timed entries defined their style. Witnesses recalled that they were oddly polite during robberies, never harming hostages unnecessarily, and often issuing calm but firm instructions. Their goal was to be in and out before anyone could react, and they succeeded repeatedly. Their biggest job came in 1980, when they hit a Bank of America branch in San Diego. The crew escaped with more than $280,000, a staggering sum for the time, and one of the largest bank hauls in California's history. Despite their reputation, they rarely left much evidence behind, frustrating law enforcement on both sides of the border. Eventually, their luck ran out. In the early 1980s, the Stopwatch Gang was captured after a string of U.S. robberies drew increasing FBI attention. Each member served prison time, though their legend had already taken hold. Even in custody, Stephen Reed later wrote acclaimed novels about his life of crime, further cementing their place in history. The Stopwatch Gang remains notorious not for brutality, but for style, a criminal crew that turned speed, planning, and precision into their signature, proving that sometimes the clock is just as powerful as a gun. Thank you for watching. If you learned anything, let me know with a like, and comment below on what you would like to see in the future. History never runs out of surprises, and neither do we. So subscribe and join me for the next dive into the archives.